Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. We love to dig through these market reports and see what's really going on out there this week. It's the Bright MLS report, week ending December 15th, 2024. So pretty up to date. And as always, we want to make it relevant for you guys. If you think about buying, selling, investing, whatever's going on in your real estate life, hopefully we can shed some light on it.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right in. We always start big picture and then kind of zoom in.
Yeah, what's the overview?
What's going on? And one thing that popped out to me right away is new contracts are up, across the Mid-Atlantic region, 9.2% jump compared to this time last year. That's pretty big.
It is, yeah, that's pretty substantial. And, especially when we're heading into the holidays, things tend to slow down this time of year, so it seems like buyers are still out there.
Yeah, they're not shying away.
Right.
And on that note, we talk about new contracts. There's also more homes for sale. New listings are up 3.8% year over year. So maybe that's why buyers are still out there. They got a little more to choose from.
Yeah, potentially more options out there, but there's always a catch, right?
Always.
Those list prices are still high. We're looking at a median of $370,000 for the Mid-Atlantic, so that's up 5.7% from last December.
Yeah, that's a pretty hefty increase.
Yeah, it is.
But I know we were chatting before we started recording, and you mentioned that this trend with the pricing is really regional.
It is.
So I'm curious, for the Washington metro area specifically, a lot of our listeners are there. What's the story on pricing?
Yeah, so the Washington metro area is actually really interesting because it is the only region where the list prices are actually down year over year from this time last year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's a pretty big difference compared to the rest of the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, completely opposite of the overall trend.
Yeah.
Any ideas on why that might be? What's going on in our neck of the woods?
I think there's a couple different factors that could be playing into it. Maybe the Washington metro area saw a bigger price surge earlier in the pandemic, so maybe we're seeing a little bit of a correction now.
Okay, so kind of a rebalancing.
Exactly. Yeah, or it could be tied to, specific things happening in the local economy, shifts in the job market, affordability concerns, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got that big picture now. I want to, as always, zero in on North Central Virginia. I know that's an area where we get a lot of questions from our listeners. Mm-hmm. Folks are really curious about what's going on there. So what insights does this report give us specifically for North Central Virginia?
Yeah, so unfortunately, they don't break out year-over-year comparisons for North Central Virginia in this report.
Oh, bummer.
I know, but they do give us week-to-week trends, so we can still kind of get a pulse on what's happening right now.
Okay. All right, so let's dive into those weekly trends then. First up, showings. Are they increasing or decreasing in North Central Virginia?
So showings are actually down 10.7% from last week in North Central Virginia. And that's compared to the overall Bright MLS area, which saw a 10% drop. So it's a little bit of a sharper decline in North Central Virginia.
Interesting. So less activity compared to the week before. Does that signal like a cooling market, or is it too early to say?
Yeah, I think it's a little too early to tell, for sure. There's so many things that can impact buyer behavior. Interest rates, general market sentiment, it's hard to pinpoint one specific reason.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. So showings are down a bit. What about new purchase contracts? Are buyers still actively, putting in offers?
Yeah, so new purchase contracts are also down slightly in North Central Virginia, about 1.2% from the previous week. And this is a little bit bigger of a dip than the overall Bright MLS area, which actually saw a 2.5% increase in contracts.
Okay, so it's kind of a mixed bag. Showings and contracts down a bit in North Central Virginia, while contracts are actually up in the broader region. So definitely some unique things happening locally. How quickly are homes going under contract once they're listed in North Central Virginia?
So the median time to contract in North Central Virginia is holding steady at 25 days, same as the previous week.
Okay, and just to remind folks, what does median actually mean in this context?
Yeah, so median means half of the homes sold faster than 25 days and half of the homes sold slower.
Okay, so it gives us a sense of that overall pace.
Exactly.
Of the market. And in North Central Virginia, things are moving pretty quickly. 25 days, that's faster than the overall Bright MLS area where it takes a median of 32 days.
Yeah, so things are definitely moving a little quicker in North Central Virginia.
Okay, so even though we saw that little dip in activity week over week, things are still moving at a good clip in North Central Virginia. What about the sellers? Are we seeing, New listings flood the market in North Central Virginia.
Actually, no new listings in North Central Virginia are down 11.9% from the previous week. So again, a larger decrease compared to the overall Bright MLS area, which saw a 15.2% drop in new listings.
All right, so less action from both buyers and sellers week over week. Okay, but let's get to the question everyone's waiting for. What's happening with prices in North Central Virginia?
Drumroll, please. The median list price in North Central Virginia is $514,950, and this is up 0.8% from the previous week.
Wait, so hold on. Prices are ticking up slightly week over week, even though we're seeing less activity?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
It's a really interesting point because it suggests that even with that little dip in showings and contracts, demand is still strong enough to push those prices upward.
Yeah, that is interesting. So what does all of this mean for our listener who's thinking about buying or selling in North Central Virginia? I mean, it seems like we're getting some mixed signals here.
Yeah, it's definitely a nuanced market right now. On the one hand, there's potentially less competition compared to the previous week, both from other buyers and sellers.
Okay, so a little more breathing room to make decisions, maybe?
Exactly. But on the other hand, prices are still high, and in North Central Virginia, they're creeping upwards, so it's not necessarily a buyer's market just yet.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. There's definitely a lot to consider, and it's clear that this local market, has its own unique dynamics. But before we jump into what this means for our listeners personally, I'm curious about those broader economic factors you mentioned earlier. How are things like interest rates and the job market influencing what we're seeing in real estate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so important to remember that real estate doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's very much tied to what's happening in the economy as a whole. So, for instance, interest rates have been really unpredictable lately.
And even small changes in interest rates can have a big impact on affordability.
Absolutely. Higher interest rates make it more expensive to borrow money for a mortgage, so that can potentially price some buyers out of the market or lead them to, adjust their expectations.
So it's a bit of a waiting game to see where interest rates will go.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of things that are hard to predict, let's talk about the job market now. The report doesn't dive into specific job market data for our region, but it's something to keep an eye on. A strong job market with low unemployment usually means more people are feeling confident about making big purchases like buying a home.
Right. A healthy job market can really boost the real estate market.
Absolutely. But if the job market weakens, people might be more hesitant to take on a mortgage, and that could lead to a slowdown in real estate.
So it's a bit of a balancing act between these different economic forces.
It really is. And one more factor that's always at play is inflation. When inflation is high, as it has been recently, the purchasing power of your money decreases. So even if you're pre-approved for a certain amount, that amount might not go as far as it did a year ago.
Inflation really adds another layer of complexity to the whole picture.
It sure does. It really does. So with all these factors swirling around, let's bring it back to our listener in the Washington Metro and North Central Virginia area. If you're thinking about buying a home, what does this snapshot of the market mean for you?
Well, it seems like it's not quite the frenzy we saw earlier in the pandemic.
Right, that little dip in showings and contracts week over week might suggest less competition from other buyers.
Okay, so less chance of a bidding war, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. And, it also might give you a little more breathing room to make a decision without feeling pressured to, act super quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a welcome change for some buyers. I think a lot of folks were feeling overwhelmed by how fast-paced things were the last couple of years.
Absolutely. But remember, prices are still high, and in North Central Virginia, they're actually ticking upward.
So important to be realistic about your budget and your expectations.
Exactly. And knowing that homes are moving relatively quickly in North Central Virginia, that median time to contract of 25 days means you need to be prepared to act decisively when you find a property you love.
Have your financing in order, be ready to make a strong offer.
Exactly. Now let's flip the script and consider our listener who's thinking about selling a home in the Washington Metro or North Central Virginia area. What does this market snapshot tell them?
Well, I think knowing that the overall Washington Metro area is seeing, a slight cooling trend in terms of prices might encourage a seller to be a bit more strategic with their asking price.
That's a great point. It's about finding that sweet spot between getting top dollar for your property and appealing to buyers in a market that's, showing signs of leveling off.
Right. But then in North Central Virginia, where prices are still inching upward, a seller might feel a bit more confident about their pricing strategy.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding those local market nuances. And remember, even though we're seeing, a slight dip in activity week over week, homes are still moving relatively quickly in North Central Virginia.
So a seller can still expect a relatively, efficient sale process.
Exactly. But regardless of whether you're buying or selling, I think one of the most crucial pieces of advice is to work with a knowledgeable real estate agent who really understands the local market dynamics. They can guide you through the process, help you interpret the data, and just make sure you're making informed decisions.
Yeah, that's such valuable advice. A good agent is like a trusted partner in this whole journey.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, there's one more point I want to highlight from the report. It mentions canceled listings, which are basically deals that fall through after an offer has been accepted.
Oh, yeah. Those are real estate nightmares.
Yeah, you think you found the perfect home or the perfect buyer, and then suddenly the rug is pulled out from under you.
It can be so stressful and disappointing. So let's talk about why these cancellations happen, and more importantly, what our listener can do to protect themselves from ending up in that situation.
Yeah, so one of the most frequent culprits is financing issues. Maybe the buyer's loan falls through, or they get cold feet about taking on such a big financial commitment.
Especially with interest rates being so volatile lately, I can see how financing can be a real sticking point.
Absolutely. And, in a cooling market, buyers might be more cautious about overextending themselves financially.
Makes sense. Are there any other common reasons for these cancellations?
Yeah. Another potential snag is the home inspection. If the inspection uncovers some major problems that the seller isn't willing to address, the buyer might back out, especially if they're not prepared to shoulder the cost of those repairs.
So a thorough home inspection is crucial for both buyers and sellers.
Exactly. It can help uncover those potential issues early on and prevent those nasty surprises down the road.
Okay, so we understand why these cancellations happen. Now let's talk about prevention. What can our listener do to minimize the risk of a deal falling through, whether they're buying or selling?
Great question. So if you're a buyer, one of the most important things you can do is get pre-approved for a mortgage before you even start house hunting. This shows sellers that you're serious and financially capable of following through on your offer.
And it gives you a clearer picture of what you can actually afford, so you're not wasting time looking at properties that are out of your price range.
Exactly. Another tip for buyers is to be flexible with contingencies. Now, I know contingencies are there to protect you, but being overly rigid can sometimes make sellers nervous.
Right. If your offer is contingent on a million different things, the seller might just go with a buyer who seems, less demanding.
Right. It's about finding that balance between protecting your interests and presenting a compelling offer. Now, for sellers, being upfront and honest about any known issues with your property is key.
Don't try to hide those leaky basements or creaky floorboards.
Exactly. Transparency builds trust and helps avoid problems later on. And just like for buyers, having a realistic asking price is super important for sellers.
Yeah, as tempting as it might be to shoot for the moon, overpricing your home can lead to a longer time on the market and even, you guessed it, canceled listings.
Exactly. It can also make potential buyers wonder if there's something wrong with the property if it's been sitting on the market for a while.
It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Absolutely. And remember, a skilled real estate agent can help you navigate these complexities and make informed decisions that protect your interests.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From those big picture market trends to those hyperlocal insights for the Washington Metro and North Central Virginia area. And we even tackled those tricky canceled listings.
We went from macro to micro and back again. Yeah, we did it all. So here's a question to really kind of wrap things up, especially for those of you in the Washington Metro area, where we're seeing that kind of unusual dip in list prices compared to last year. If you were buying in this market, what would be more important to you, getting a lower price, than homes were selling for a year ago, or having less competition from other buyers?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about what matters most right now.
Yeah, exactly. Some buyers might be super focused on getting a deal, especially if they think prices have peaked. They might be willing to wait it out, see if those prices drop even further.
Yeah, but there's always that fear of missing out.
Right, exactly. What if the market suddenly heats up again and those folks who are waiting, they miss out?
They're left behind.
And that's where that second part of the question comes in, right? How much competition are you comfortable with? Some buyers would rather pay a little more if it means having more choices and, less stress from those bidding wars.
So it's a trade-off, price versus peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly. And the answer is going to be different for everyone. It depends on your finances, your risk tolerance, your personality even.
Yeah, and it really speaks to, how important it is to really understand your own goals and priorities before you even start house hunting.
Absolutely, because the best decision is the one that's right for you and your situation.
So true. Well, we've covered a ton of ground today, from those big picture trends in the Mid-Atlantic to those really specific insights for the Washington Metro and North Central Virginia markets, and even those tricky canceled listings.
Yeah, we really went deep.
We did. And along the way, we talked about how important it is to stay informed, understand those economic factors, and work with a good real estate agent who can really be your guide in this whole process.
Because knowledge is power, especially in a market like real estate where things are always changing.
So well said. All right, folks, that's a wrap for our deep dive this week. As always, we hope you learned something new and are feeling more confident about making those big real estate decisions, whether you're buying, selling, or just keeping an eye on the market. Remember, knowledge is power, and sometimes a deep dive is all it takes to get that power.
Until next time, happy informed decision making.